Okay, right. Thank you all for coming to the first meeting of the Scrutiny Board, Environment, Housing and Communities. I'm Councillor Barry Anderson. I chair this particular Scrutiny Board. So what I'll do first of all is to go around the table for everybody to introduce themselves, because we've got a number of new members. We've also got a number of returning members who have obviously enjoyed themselves so much in the past that they've wanted to come back again. So, Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Pauline Graham, Crossgates and Winmore Ward, and a long-time member.
Javed Akhtar, Councillor for Little London and Woodhouse Ward. Good morning, everyone. Councillor Asghar Khan, Councillor for Burma, Trosman, Richmond Hill, and it's nice to be back after a year of civic duties. Yay! Thank you.
Councillor Kaylee Brooks, Little London and Woodhouse Ward.
Oh, morning, everyone. Councillor Annie Maloney at Beeston and Holbeck Ward.
Councillor Neil Walsh, Headingley and Hyde Park.
Councillor Al Garthwaite, substituting today for Councillor Lou Cunningham. I'm from Headingley and Hyde Park Ward.
Hi everyone, Councillor John Tudor from Killing, representing Killybeck and Seacroft.
Good morning, Tim Rollett from the Council's Intelligence and Policy Service.
Hi, Mandy Sawyer, Head of Service in the Housing Management.
Good morning, Adam Crampton, Head of Property Management for Housing.
Good morning, everyone. John Mulcahy, Chief Officer, Elections and Regulatory.
Good morning, John Woolmer, Chief Officer for Environmental Services.
Morning, everybody. Paul Money, Chief Officer for the Safer Stronger Communities team.
Morning, everyone. Lee Hemsworth, Chief Officer for Community Hubs, Welfare and Business Support.
Mary Howland, Councillor for Kippets and Method Ward, Executive Board Member for Communities and ex-member of this Scrutiny Board.
Helen Hayden, Councillor for Temple Newsome, Exec Member for Infrastructure and Climate, and I've never been on this board.
Morning, everybody. Councillor Sandy Lay, Otley and Yeadon Ward, and returning after 8 years.
Councillor Paul Wadsworth, Guys in Road and Ward, and I think I've been on this board sometime in the last 18 years, but not for a while.
Good morning, everyone. Councillor Trish Smith, I represent Pudsey Ward.
Councillor Ed Carlisle for Hunslet and Riverside.
Good morning, everybody. Angela Brogden, Principal Scrutiny Advisor.
Right. So, Polly, can you introduce yourself, please?
Apologies for late arrival. Polly Cook, Chief Officer, Sustainable Energy and Air Quality.
And Sean?
Sean Fletcher, Chief Officer, Parks and Countryside.
Through the first few items, right? Any appeals?
There are no appeals, Chair.
Item 2.
There are no items excluded from the public domain.
Item 3.
There are no late items of business.
Item 4.
At this point, please, can I ask members to make any declarations of interest? And I shall take silence as none. Thank you.
Item 5.
Chair, we have apologies from Councillor Cunningham, and Councillor Garthwaite is in attendance as substitute member.
And thank you to Councillor Garthwaite for making yourself available. Councillor Garthwaite probably will be attending the Scrutiny Board on a number of occasions throughout the year because of her other role in terms of being in charge of the Police and Crime Panel. So congratulations on your appointment there and welcome today. Councillor Harland?
I think Councillor Cooper sends her apologies as well, but may come late.
Yeah. And whenever, yeah.
A bit of an eager beaver there. Apologies for being late. My name is Councillor Salma Arif. I'm the Exec Member for Public Health and Active Lifestyles. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, right. Angela, item 7, Scrutiny Board.
Thank you, Chair. So this report sets out the board terms of reference for members' information, and you'll find on Appendix 3 of the report, this gives an overview of how each of the Council's 5 individual scrutiny boards this year have been aligned to officer delegated functions and portfolios. Just to note at this point, it is currently being suggested that the terms of reference be amended so that there's elements of Councillor Cooper's portfolio that's moved back to the remit of strategy and resources, and that would include functions relating to civic enterprise Leeds. So once there's confirmation of any change, that'll be reported back to the board.
So we're happy to note. Yep, good. Did members?
Chair, the Scrutiny Board procedure rules within the Council's constitution outlines the options that are available to scrutiny boards in relation to appointing co-opted members. So this report provides the guidance to the board when seeking to appoint co-opted members. And as discussed previously, historically, this scrutiny board has opted to agree the appointment of co-opted members on an ad hoc basis for any inquiries where it's deemed appropriate. So the recommendation is for you to just consider that option again for this year. Thank you, Chair.
Anybody get any comments? I'm going to, yeah. As I was saying in the pre-meeting, the one person who does come regularly is the chair of the Tenant Scrutiny Board whenever we're discussing housing related issues. So we will take that one there, fine. So now we move on to item 9, sources of scrutiny work, the main reason we're here today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite each of the executive members to tell us how we can add value in their particular portfolio, so that you can prepare in advance. The batting order I've got is, first of all, I'll be inviting Councillor Arif, then Councillor Harland, then Councillor Hayden, and when Councillor Rafiq arrives, he will be, he's here now. For those who are watching on YouTube, we're just waiting till he's able to sit down. Do you want to introduce yourself, Councillor Rafiq?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Apologies for the slight delay. Councillor Mohammed Rafiq, I'm the Exec Board Member for Environment and Housing.
To the work that she's doing this year.
Thank you, Chair. We also had a conversation about this. So I think for me as an exec member coming out and away from the pandemic, the focus really is about the health inequalities and what we can do with that and how our parks departments can help with that. And I think the biggest piece of work we've got is the park strategy, which has got some really important strategy and some actions that we need to take. And I think that from my perspective, it's how our parks could be used in terms of better utilised by communities and being more active in them, but also a more welcoming place for the citizens of Leeds. And I think that the park strategy is obviously it's a long strategy, but any support the board could give on that would be really helpful. I think and any ideas in terms of how we can use our parks, which I think will play a pivotal role in the health inequalities and mentally as well, getting people out there, because we realised how important our green spaces were during the pandemic. But the truth is not everybody has got a park outside sort of their backyard. So that's important for me as well. And also in terms of our more inner city areas where we do have housing, for example, in my ward, we've got back-to-back houses with no gardens. How do we make sure that our more community parks are effectively back gardens for those residents? So I think that's a big piece of work that I really want to focus on, and any support I can get from the board would be really welcome with that.
Thank you. For those why I'm struggling with the buttons, usually as the chair, you can keep the mics on all the time. They've now taken away that capacity, so I've got to try and remember and put it on all the time. So you've heard from Councillor Reif. Anybody, any questions for Councillor Reif and or Sean Flesher in respect of the parks section? Anybody, any questions? Yes, Councillor Akhtar.
Chair, thank you. It's not a question, it's just a comment, Chair, if I may. I think it's absolutely a good initiative Councillor Arif has chosen, because whether like today, and she's absolutely right when she says there are terrace houses in our part of the city where many people don't have a garden for the children, and especially the ward I represent, for example, with many of high-rise blocks, kids are living in 15th or 16th floor, and I think it'll be a good opportunity to work with Councillor Arif to see more facilities in our open spaces where we are lacking in some part of the city. So I think we should appreciate the work that she's doing on with regards to the open spaces, Chair.
Any other questions? The only ones that I've got is that when we bring in the park strategy, should we look at the tree strategies that go along with it as well, so that we end up having a themed meeting effectively on parks related things? And the only direct question I have is, I think it's been a long time, it might be shorter, the SEMS and CREMS strategy. When was the last time that was reviewed? Can you remember, Sean, the last time we reviewed that strategy?
Yeah, there's a 50-year burial plan, effectively, not a strategy, because the City Council is not the only sole provider, effectively. That was approved in 2008, and that set out the council's burial plans, if you like, to 2058. So while it was a while ago, we're actually only a proportion into that long-term strategy.
I was wondering if there's anything happened in the city that we need to look at it, but in your professional judgment, and Councillor Rees as well, that the strategy is still current and there's nothing. No, well, on that, before we go, I'll bring in Councillor Brooke.
Thanks, Chair. There's been some progress in terms of there's a thing called water cremation. There's been a sort of progress in technology, and there's also a bit more understanding by people about natural burials, because obviously formaldehyde and things like that leaching into the ground isn't very nice. So I think it'd be useful to look at it from an environmental point of view, because the traditional cremation actually it uses a lot more energy than what the new water cremation does.
Yeah.
Sounds like something for one of your infamous working groups.
Thank you. I can't see Sean. Is it at the end of? I can't recall which board it was, but I chaired that scrutiny board and we visited the cemeteries. There was a lot of work done. So it would be good to follow up. Can you remember, Sean? Where is it? Yeah.
I mean, a lot of the recommendations back in 2008 were initially from the recommendations that came out of that scrutiny inquiry.
Is that Angela will come up with a long list, and believe you me, if the previous scrutiny boards that have happened this year so far are anything to go with, it will be a very long list, and then we will try and prioritise, we'll try and pull themes together to decide whether or not it's worthwhile having a major meeting where we discuss a range of items under a heading, or whether we have specific working groups which may last an hour and a half, or we just need to get a paper sent to us so that we can then decide whether or not we want to do further thoughts. So on that basis, sorry, Ed.
Yeah, just not about cemeteries, but just a question for Councillor Reef. Like, forgive me if this is entirely obvious, but I suppose what I see in South Leeds is the huge value that the Friends of groups for the parks bring. And I think the change in the last few years has been Friends of groups for some of the really small pocket parks. And again, as we all will appreciate, adds huge value and brings local buy-in. I mean, yeah, is there a strategy to get a Friends of group or some form of group for every single green space in the city? Could that be done?
Yeah, I believe there is. I think we actually massively rely on friends of groups, to be honest with you. We probably couldn't do everything at all if it wasn't for some really important volunteers out in the community. It isn't as strong in some communities as it should be. And then I think, you know, for example, my neck of the wood, it took us a little while to get an in bloom group going, and it's just supporting them. But yeah, no, that's, if you look at the strategy, I think there's a quite a bit about us actually working and supporting and encouraging that sort of commitment from local volunteers and groups, because it's absolutely crucial. So yeah, you're absolutely right.
Do you have a database of matching a green space with a friends of group? In other words, if I said to you, can you print out a list? Is that easy to do, or is it quite difficult to do?
We have a list of friends groups that we work with and are aware of, so that's quite easy to do. We've probably got, if you include the in bloom groups, we've got well over 100 groups that we're involved with in various partnerships, etc.
If I was to ask for that information, then it could then be sent electronically out to all members of the scrutiny board, and it wouldn't cost you a lot in terms of time or resource in order to pull it together.
Yeah, that'll be fine. I mean, I just ask members to bear with us. It might not be wholly exhaustive, but it's certainly got the main ones that we're aware of.
Yes. Thank you, Councillor Reif. Oh, sorry. Councillor Garthwaite, and then I've got Councillor Smith as well.
Yes, just on that, in my time of being more responsible for parks, there was the Leeds Parks and Green Space Forum, which does include a lot of the friends groups who meet together on a regular quarterly basis. And it would be good to see how many of the friends groups are actually involved in that and how many aren't, and whether they can be promoted more thoroughly. I know that you attend when you can to the forum, and also that there's an officer who's the secretary of it. But it was a very good, flourishing forum, and it would be useful to know whether the pandemic has decreased its value or whether it's coming up again, because it's good for different friends groups to meet with each other, and all encouragement on that is very useful.
Councillor Reif, and then Councillor Smith, then Councillor Khan.
Just on the back of that, Sean and I have also explored potentially looking at financial help for some of these groups. So just a small pocket of pot where financial groups, if they need some support just to get going, that's something we are looking at doing, because sometimes that's what some communities need. So that's definitely something I'm keen to do, and I know it will be helpful for some local organisations.
Right, Councillor Smith, and then Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to bring up the Green Space Forum and the Loves Leeds Parks group as well, and wonder if we could perhaps invite them in and check that. In terms of the list that is held by Parks with the Friends groups, if that was shared with members, we could maybe add on any that we're aware of within our own wards as well, and perhaps build that up, and then we could see where the gaps were. Just a suggestion.
Mr. Khan?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. My question is to Sean. Sean, when we're talking about groups for green spaces, but we do have cemeteries, friends of cemeteries groups as well, and they work in the silos. And is there any way we can bring that into mainstream as well? And how will we do it? Like, bring those and empower those groups as well?
Yeah, I mean, those groups are effectively treated and get the same level of support as of the rest of our groups. In fact, we actually have, for Friends of Cemeteries, we actually have a dedicated ranger service that's partly supported by some of the bereavement service charges that we allocate to that particular area. So we are actually trying to support to get more friends groups and involved in their local cemetery.
The performance management, so much as I'd like to release you, you might ask a question later on. So I can now move on to Councillor Harland. Would you like to just outline how we might be able to add value for you?
Thank you, Chair. Well, as I said earlier, having been on this board, I know that this board has played a really important part in much of what this directorate does. You've already got on there the financial inclusion, which I think is going to be more prevalent this year with the cost of living crisis. The team work extremely hard. There's also the new locality working that you had the watching brief on, and that needs to be kept up and see how that goes on. Since that's been reintroduced, I think one of the new things that we mentioned at our meeting was migration, which is the really hot topic at the minute. I think it'd be useful for the board to be involved and understand the very different and very many schemes that the team are dealing with, and what we're doing, how we're reacting to often on the hop new processes and procedures coming in. So I think that would be useful. I think you mentioned a working group on that, which, you know, we could include speaking to some of our guests that have settled here or want to settle here. But I think that'd be really useful. I don't know if Lee or Paul have got anything to add to that.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Harland. Yeah, I think if anything, just to kind of reinforce the value that might bring to this work. It is a really, as Councillor Harland has described, it's a really dynamic environment. Is this at the moment probably as dynamic now as it's been that we can remember, with obviously the Ukrainian, the Afghanistan work, the Syrian, and the broader asylum activity. So there is lots of work ongoing. It is principally supported by one of my teams, but there is a wider, obviously a wider council contribution to this particular agenda, particularly thinking about how we're supporting people coming into the city integrate into our arrangements, and that partnership extends beyond the council. Just thinking about some of our colleagues in West Yorkshire Police, for instance, and also I think it'd be important to reference the contribution of the voluntary and community sector work that's significant. So I would support those comments from Councillor Harland.
When I was in my discussion, one of the things I raised was the issue of housing, because there is a coming issue where some of the people who have come into the city are now looking to go out and get housing of their own for a number of reasons, and it's how you integrate them into our banding and how you assess the housing need. And we need to look at that. It's something I don't think we've actually got a definitive policy on at the moment, and it's something I think we need to look at, and this board, I think, could provide some guidance on that. So to Councillor Harland, Lee.
That's okay. Thanks, Chair. I was just going to echo Councillor Harland's comments about this welfare work. I mean, clearly the board were already looking at, we were doing a review, or are doing a review of local welfare support. And the board had got the original scope for that at one of its meetings earlier this year. So that's coming back. But I think given the cost of living and the impact of that, and the funding issues in terms of the short-term nature of any sort of support that's come in terms of household support fund, we are doing a broader review of welfare. We're setting up a sort of a citywide group, and it's actually going to be a breakthrough project in terms of the sort of best city ambitions and things. So I think there's a lot there that this board could add value to, and I think we've set aside September. So we're doing a report to exec board in July around poverty and inequality and the cost of living and things like that. So I think we said there's a session in September where we'd bring that here, the review, an update on the local welfare support review, and there's probably updates on that sort of city group and things that we can bring into that. So I'd support that.
Right. In terms of questions, I know that Councillor Brooke wanted to raise as to whether or not something could be brought here or not. That was in terms of the funding.
Yeah, the Shared Prosperity Fund and the impact of that. I'm not sure where it will sit.
Lee, does that come under your remit?
Yeah. No, sorry, no, it doesn't. I think in terms of I think it's City Development who are leading on the actual submission, but we've all contributed to the ask of there. So I know there's certain elements of welfare ask. I know Paul's just said there's certain asks of that. So I think Martin Long is the relevant chief officer who's done the work, but I know there are asks that impact on.
Right. So does that mean that would come under Councillor Trustwell? Councillor Trustwell. What we'll do is we will pass that on, because when I've been talking to you all, I think we've identified a number of cross scrutiny inquiries, and I think this could be one that we could contribute. Now, for those that don't know what that basically means, is that a scrutiny board is chosen to lead on that, and then members of the other scrutiny boards are invited to come along. So you might get 2 or 3 members representing the rest of the board on some of these cross scrutiny inquiries, which have done a lot in terms of what's happening. Councillor Harland?
I think on the last subject on the refugees, I think we mentioned that cross cuts across housing, education, lots and lots of different things, children's services, the lot.
So anybody, any other questions for Councillor Harland or any? Yeah, Councillor Lay.
Thanks, Chair. More of a comment really in support of a look at migration. I think it is fair to say that a lot has happened in 2 years, and I've been supporting a pretty active group in Otley with their Ukrainian visitors, for want of another word. They're broadly really supportive of what the council's done, and broadly really unsupportive of what's been said nationally but actually been delivered. So I think it would be worth us having a look at what's said and what's actually been able to be delivered, because I know the 350 quid a month has taken quite some time to come to fruition.
Thank you again, Chair. It's just again in support of the migration and understanding how challenging it is, and I'd like, if possible, and within any sort of GDPR parameters, to see if we could get a list of possible people in our wards, so that we can actually make contact with them, welcome them, make sure that they're looking at all the support that they can possibly get within each ward. I would certainly welcome that within my own ward if it wasn't possible across the city, or not welcomed across the city. But I do think that we need to make sure that these people do have the resources that they need and are welcomed as well as we can get them. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. If I can just follow by both of the colleagues who have just spoken, I think it's also important to understand and appreciate not only the recent work the council has done with the Ukraine issue, but also, if I may so, when there was an issue in Afghanistan, and I know Mary, when I was the chair for the community committee, Mary went out of her way with the officers to visit some of our newly migrants who have joined us, and that's the spirit we want to see in this city. Politicians and the officers are going out of the way to welcome people, and this city has always been the champion of welcoming with open arms. So thank you, Mary, and your team, and we'll all look forward to do what we can to support our newly migrant communities in our city.
I'd just like to say as well, on top of that, that we are applying for the City of Sanctuary to become a City of Sanctuary. And I was at an event yesterday, which was the Schools of Sanctuary, with 5 schools that were up for an award. I was pleased to say that one of them was my old high school, John Smeaton Academy. Wasn't an academy then. But just to let you know that there's things going on in the city, that we are a City of Sanctuary already. And I mean, the Little Amalth event that took place the other day shows what a wonderful city we do live in, but there's still work to do, but it's ongoing.
Walshaw.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. More of a comment than a question to colleagues, really, but I think a cost of living focus is entirely appropriate for this year. Be really interested to hear from some practical practitioners in the city, like Money Buddies, who we're starting to. I know all the colleagues are seeing work, do some great work in their own wards. I think it'd be important to hear what they've got to say.
Now, usually when we look at that, we get the CAB. We also get the gentleman from Chapel Town coming as well, plus Money Buddies. We've had a good cross section. We also get the DWP usually send along some representatives as well, so that we can all understand what's happening, and it's good. Councillor Brooke.
Can I suggest that we also invite the Food Aid Network? Yeah.
Carlisle.
It's not about inviting anybody else. I'm sure some of you will be aware of this, but friends of mine who work or volunteer in the refugee and asylum sector talk about the remarkable discrepancy between provision for different groups, and it's mainly to do with the central government funding that comes with certain groups or not. So, for example, the Afghan refugees who came across on a managed programme have got a lot of resource coming at them, which is great. Other groups don't have that same level of resource. I suppose it'd be interesting to, if we've not already had something like this, get a report from somebody working in that sector to enable us to better understand which groups are perhaps falling through the cracks a bit more, which ones are getting less resource, and then and I don't know whether Ukrainian communities fit within that, but so that we can best allocate our resources and try to balance out the playing field.
Usually, when we've looked this scrutiny board, with the previous chief officer complimented us on the way that we dealt with the migrant community in the past, and we also work with Migration Yorkshire as well to make sure that we're not just being parochial and looking at what happens in Leeds. We are aware that we are, well, we are probably the centre of West Yorkshire, but we have, and we, as a result of that, we have responsibilities out with our own boundaries as well, and I think we have got evidence of that. Councillor Khan.
Yeah, Chair, just briefly, when I had the other hat last year, and I'd had the opportunity to visit different, organisations, different part of the city. But what I saw, and I was alarmed, I was really surprised, and people really appreciated what fantastic work the Leeds City Council has done as well. And I had the first-hand experience as well. And coming back to the cost of living, I think that's really important. And there are some organisations and there are some gaps with the service, providing that advice, basic advice. And I think organisations such as St Vincent's, Money Buddy does a fantastic work, Chapel FM, the other organisations do amazing work in Leeds. But I think we should invite St Vincent's as well. They do a fantastic work with migration people as well, and with other citizens of Leeds. Thank you.
Mr. Harland.
Just to say that we do have a third sector partnership in the city, that we work very closely with third sector partners working across different sorts of things, and we are in regular conversations with those, and the relationships are really, really good. So we are on with the third sector and really value. Hence, we've continued to invest in our third sector when many haven't. So the relationships are there, but there's always work to do.
The team. So I can now move on to Councillor Hayden. Would you like to just briefly outline where we might be able to add value?
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everybody. In terms of my portfolio this year, and it's there's kind of a lot of crossover with particularly Councillor Trustwell's scrutiny group, but I know it's planning, but the local plan update, which will be started which starts in September, is focusing on affordable housing. And so it will come into this scrutiny board, and I think the scrutiny board will have a lot to add, a lot of value to add on that consultation that will start in September. I notice it's down for November for housing activity update, and I wonder whether the board would like to look at the local plan update 2 in that meeting on as it focuses on affordable housing and the challenges and what we need for the city. I'd also, in terms of housing, like to ask Scrutiny to consider the decarbonisation of particularly council housing programme, but other housing as well. And as well as being environmental, it would fit into reducing poverty. Because when you decarbonise a house, when you retrofit, etc., bills are reduced, the need for energy is reduced, and therefore tackling fuel poverty and then other types of poverty as well, especially at the moment. And also, there is a real feeling from me about a renewed, as we come, Councillor Arif mentioned coming out of the pandemic, and a renewed need for a renewed focus on air quality. And kind of our what we want to achieve as a city. We've already set a target of the World Health Organization's level of pollution, of air pollution, and if the board could add in, obviously things improved during the pandemic when less cars were being driven, you know, that need for getting people onto more active, which comes into the kind of active travel, but also public transport as well, and the work going on in the city in terms of EV charging points and that sort of thing. So yeah, I'll leave it there. Chair, thank you.
We also, this board has a watching brief over the climate emergency as well, but there is the Climate Emergency Advisory Committee. So we try and not duplicate the work that they are doing, but we do have the overall responsibility for making sure that the Climate Emergency Committee are up to scratch. And then usually around about February time, approximately the same time as SEAC takes its major report to council, we try and do a scrutiny inquiry around about the same time. So that's the background. So questions to Councillor Hayden and Polly Cook. Anybody got any questions they would like to ask? Or are you happy with what's been suggested? Yes.
Hi. I don't know if this is the right place for the question. It's a bit of a random one, really. But there used to be the round the city centre bus that was free. Is it still there? I don't know, because I don't live in the city centre anymore. But it's still running and running well. And can it be could it be expanded? Are they electric? That sort of thing, you know.
In terms of, it's not electric, that free one that goes around. I mean, that would come under more infrastructure, wouldn't it? In terms of, but I have seen it recently, pulling up at St John's Centre. So, and it goes up to your neck of the woods, doesn't it, Councillor Walshaw? And yeah, so yeah, it's not electric. I'm very lucky that in my ward we had the first electric bus, the number 5, that comes into and does the enterprise zone as well as the city centre. I know that First Bus are introducing 9 more electric buses and 9 more lines, and that they have electric charging points at their depot in Hunslet, if I've got the right H. So there is that move to more electric buses, which obviously would helps out with air quality. Yeah.
I'll get Angela to get a briefing paper sent to you. I mean, yeah, the buses are out with the remit of the scrutiny board, but don't worry about that. I mean, I'm relatively flexible in terms of the areas we will cover. If we're going down too many rabbit holes, I will say no, but I'm quite happy to have a general discussion on things that are important and connect together. Councillor Walshaw?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Very much agree with what Councillor Hayden said in her opening preamble. I think obviously there's a lot of overlap with SEAC, but perhaps we could particularly focus on the cost effectiveness of decarbonisation interventions. which is quite a sentence. Because we've got, as Polly could attest to, we've got a really strong range of examples in the city, and we could look at where we're getting our most bang for our bucks, as it were. And I think that'd be something that the scrutiny board could do that would help SEAC colleagues.
I discussed that prior to the elections, actually, because I was talking about it when it was coming forward and how we can measure it. And I was asking, we were discussing how you could show that costs are reduced. But as was then pointed out, that the cost of electricity had gone up automatically. So there are very few people paying less for their electricity than they were, 2 or 3 months ago. Very, very few people. So it would be difficult to introduce that measure, but it is something that Polly was asked to look into, and George Munson as well when he was before things. But yes, I think that would fit in, because it would then show where we can get value for money, and it's making a big difference to people. And I also put the challenge out to housing at the time, particularly in my area, which is benefiting from decarbonisation, is that it's being installed brilliantly just now, but are we going to revisit these tenants come autumn so that they can then be again reminded how to operate their heating to the maximum or the optimum way of doing it, because people may have forgotten the instructions that they were given by, and they are getting instructions. I mean, I'm not complaining about that, but I think we need to remind these people about how to optimize the use of their heating in their houses. But Gerald Tinsdale has already had me chasing them on introducing a scheme for that throughout the city. But it was parochial because I was looking after my own ward, which had benefited from it. Lyle?
Sorry if we already do this, it's just a question. Do we release air quality data for the city, or should we? Again, I don't know the details, but I know there's some of the campaigners are talking about Google Insights as a piece of software that I think some cities are doing. If we're already doing it, that's great. I just want to know more.
Polly?
So some of our air quality data is live at a couple of the main DEFRA stations, and then the rest of it that we collect through diffusion tubes, we report on annually. And it all has to go back through a lab to be validated, so it's not available as quickly, but we do an annual report that shows all the trend, and you can look back at the history, so that's pretty readily available. And we often share it when people come to us to ask, we give sort of what the indication is even before it's gone through that validation, so we're really transparent on what we have.
Does any of that data go on to the Leeds data mill?
I think so. I'd have to double check. It's not my team that does it, but I think it does.
That might be a good source of it. Something called the Leeds data mill, where you can get data on just about anything and everything to do with the city. It takes a bit of research, I accept that, but in some cases, some of that information is available via the. Yeah.
We're also introducing an alert system, so with public health, so under Councillor Harris' portfolio as well, so that anybody can sign up for an email for when air quality is particularly poor, such in weather like this, and particularly primary care providers are targeting their people with lung-related problems, asthma, etc., so that they definitely get the alert for when air is particularly poor quality.
That'll be very interesting, because one of the things I was going to bring up, again, it's because something that's raised with me, is people burning bonfires, and the effect that that's having on children with asthma and various other things. Now, I don't know. I genuinely don't know whether or not it is or is not a negative impact. The residents who are complaining to me tell me it is, and maybe it's something we need to work on and look to see what we can do, because our policies on bonfires are very high level, if I can put it as diplomatically as that, and some people want further clarity. So, yeah, I think that's something we could maybe look at. Councillor Smith?
Thank you, Chair. I confirm that when the air quality is poor, it does affect your lungs badly. Having been a sufferer myself. What I was going to say, though, is a resident of mine came to me recently, and they wanted to introduce something called driven signs. So as they go around with taxis, they have an apex on the top, which is driven by solar. and that would carry out all sorts of air quality tests whilst also advertising anything that was relevant. And I know that that's kind of blocked down with licensing, I believe, at the moment. So that could be something that you could tie in with, and that would give you live data at any given point at any sort of area of the city that they happen to be driving through.
Councillor Tudor.
Hi. Yeah, again, only if appropriate, but we know that the major expansion of the airport didn't happen in the end, but I believe there's still a increase in flying hours. And what made me think of it is I think I heard a plane just now. Isn't that a pretty major thing in the city and over the city that is sort of air quality related? And is that a thing for scrutiny?
I'll let Polly come in with the actual kind of data in terms of air quality. There is no increase in flying hours, but there is a potential with the 1918, I was going to say that, 2018 planning, 19 planning permission that the LBA have reverted back to and not taken up last year's planning permission, that they could have increased flights and increased passenger numbers, but not the flying hours. That wasn't part of the planning permission that they're now looking to pursue and go with. I'll let Polly in terms of the air quality.
Yeah.
So there's been a lot of sort of repeated studies in terms of the airport and air quality. I would say in terms of the overall picture, it's relatively small in terms of air quality on the ground and the impact on health. You know, there's issues that are coming to light, so like the wood burners or indoor air quality, which probably have a much more significant impact. So I think, you know, probably carbon emissions is a different matter, but in terms of air quality, I think probably better to look at those areas.
$11.40. And so can we go to page 134 of your agenda, where it's got the performance figures for sustainable energy and carbon reduction. If anybody's got any questions that they would like to ask at this point, so it's on page 134, 135 up to page 137. Anybody got any questions on anything of those, and then we can release Polly from the purgatory. No, nobody got any questions on any of that information? No, in that case, thank you very much for coming along, Polly. You've got a few more minutes before your meeting starts, but thank you for your time, and we will be meeting you regularly as the time goes on. So thank you very much. Right, so if I can now go back to Councillor Rafiq. So Councillor Rafiq, would you like to outline to scrutiny where you feel we might be able to add value?
Thank you, Chair. I'll start with housing, and I know Councillor Hayden's already alluded to some of the work done within the housing department. I think Councillor Hayden's mentioned about affordable housing and social housing. The demand for the information of, and I realise that we've got quite a few new members on the board as well. And in my time as councillor, one of the most sensitive case work is about people who want to get onto the social housing ladder, and the problem is we just haven't got enough houses to go around. So just to give you an example, we've got about 7,000 people at any one time on band A, which is the highest band. Yet the number of properties, which become available within a given year, is around, at the moment, it's around 2,500. That's new properties we've built, but also properties which become vacant. So you can imagine the waiting time if you're on band A gets higher and higher because our stock is reducing with right to buy by around 600 properties a year. So I think it would be helpful for Scrutiny's input to look into, you know, some of the pressures, which are growing pressures within that area of work, and also the members to understand that as well. I think quite rightly, you know, it's everybody wants to, you know, have a roof over their heads. It is one of the necessities, and social housing is the way forward. So it's not just the council, but also our partners as well. We work very closely with our partners within the city. Okay, so that's one area, and then Councillor Hayden's already alluded to some of the energy efficiency. Polly and Councillor Hayden kind of oversee the kind of energy, but the decarb, all the works and the housing management and repairs, everything else actually comes under homelessness, comes into my portfolio. The housing growth, which is building new houses, is Councillor Hayden's portfolio. So we work very closely as exec board members, but also as different departments as well on that. So that's housing. I'll just move on to the other part of my portfolio, which is environmental services. And that is, Scrutiny's done quite a bit of work, I think, over the last few years. This Scrutiny board, chaired by Councillor Anderson, around refuse collection and and clean the neighbourhoods work we do in the city. But I think we are at a very critical juncture in terms of our waste strategy, how we go forward. We are at a time where government, we're still waiting for some clear guidelines from government, which the strategy should be published in the next year or two. And what we're doing at the city is we've done some work around, you know, what goes into our bins, you know, a compositional analysis. And also, I think the other work we've done is, well, should we be kind of talking about recycling and you know, what goes in bins, or should it be recycling versus, you know, carbon footprint? So, you know, what reduces carbon footprint as well. So we've done some work around that. So maybe I think it would be good for Scrutiny to kind of have input, you know, listen to all those kind of information and move forward on that. I'll stop there, Chair. Happy to take any comments or questions.
Councillor Wadsworth.
Just a comment, we really should have a look at the waste strategy as part of this board, I think.
Yeah. There is, I think we could be looking, what I'm planning to do in this area. One is I'm going to run a session, particularly for the new members, but for maybe people returning, on what's the remit of housing services, what do housing services do and how they can add value. And on a similar matter, I'm planning to take the board out to Newmarket House, for those who aren't aware what that is, the new headquarters for waste collection and cleaner neighbourhoods. They have got some beautiful offices out there, and Mr. Woolmer wants to welcome everybody. He'll provide the tea, coffee and biscuits. So, but seriously, because it's beside the RERF as well, we will visit both places. And again, I think for those members who haven't been to either Newmarket House or the RERF for a while, and for the new members, it will be quite instructive to see what's happening. And we'll see if we can get Martins, who take the recycling goods, if we can get that included in some sort of tour to give people an awareness as to what's happening. And for those members who've been on the council for a while, it can be a bit of a prompt to where we are, because things are often changing in the way that things are being done. So that's two things that I've got planned to take forward. Yeah, Councillor Hayden.
Yeah, thank you, and you'll be very welcome in the best board in the city as well. But it's a neighbouring the other fabulous ward of Bermontoffs and Richmond Hill as well. So it is the border. But also you might want to look at the district heating scheme and our proposals for a district eating scheme, using the returning waste to heat greenhouses to grow food and low carbon way of growing food. So there hopefully will be greenhouses set up beside the roof there, using the returning heat. Yeah.
The agenda. That's good. Okay, so thank you very much. So that's looked at that. Now if we can move on, and we'll get some other things might come out of this, is item 10, which is the performance. Right, yes, I was hanging back in the hope that Councillor Cooper was going to be here in terms of the law and order side of things. Mr. Money, do you want to be yourself and also Councillor Cooper at the same time and outline what is planned for there? Because we do have some plans for the safer Leeds side of things as well.
Yeah, I'll do my best with that. Yeah, I do. I think the report details a number of areas where there could be some focus. We have referenced there obviously the work that we do with our police colleagues in the neighbourhood policing teams. And whilst I think police colleagues might be best placed to talk about the impact of recruiting, training and other pressures there, it is right to say that that could probably be brought into a conversation around the wider community safety agenda, bearing in mind the significant interface that takes place with the work of some of my teams and police colleagues. The antisocial behaviour agenda features prominently as you would expect, really, particularly in relation to the work of the principal team working within the council on that agenda, which is our LASBAT team. There is a wider piece of work being done around antisocial behaviour and a new strategy that's just been drafted, which looks at some of the broader sort of strategic themes. I know that members in particular will have concerns about things like antisocial use of motor vehicles, which is playing out in a number of areas. And so, those are the kind of areas that we're consistently working on, consistently trying to improve our services, and would welcome support with.
Thank you.
It might be worthwhile for new members and members that want to go again to go to the Safer Leeds Camera Centre and see what they do there, because I've been twice in 18 years and I am amazed because there's always something happens when I go. So it tends to, I don't know whether I should not go, but more to the point of what you can see and what you can't see, because members and the members of the public think that you can see a lot more than actually you can see. And sometimes that is useful for new members particularly.
Councillor Walls was not worried about being caught out at night at the weekends.
Yeah, I think that's a really good suggestion, and one would be happy to support. And whilst there is a significant role there, as you would expect, in terms of the monitoring of the public camera network across the city, there's also a significant amount of work that takes place from that centre around out of hours deployments, security patrols, and also the perennial issue that we're wrestling with across the city, linked to antisocial behaviour, which is of course the domestic noise, where there have been some developments. So it'd be an opportunity to pick up on quite a few of our linked services, and the team really do welcome members coming up to that particular facility. And in particular, we're looking at the moment for feedback about how we provide data back to members. We know that information from that particular facility is really useful to local members around some of the issues that you are helping us deal with. So it'd be good in a number of ways to facilitate some form of visit. One of the suggestions I did have which I was going to speak to Councillor Cooper about, was whether or not we might want to facilitate a visit for the community safety champions. And that would build on a visit that a number of exec members, a couple of whom are in this room, have already had. So just couldn't support that suggestion anymore. Thanks.
Hi, we are planning to have a Safer Leeds update, because one of the responsibilities that this scrutiny board has is we are the scrutiny board for the Safer Leeds Partnership, not to be confused with the Police and Crime Panel, which has got the responsibility for looking after a West Yorkshire level. Now, we have invited all of Leeds City Council's Police and Crime Panel members to this meeting in July, so that we can try and work and build up some working relationship with them. Because one of the tasks I usually carry out, sometimes at the beginning of the year, but more recently it's been towards the end of the year, is I get invited to go before the Police and Crime Panel to outline what we have been doing. And what I would like, and this time it might be a good idea for them to tell us what they would like us to look at, and then we can maybe work together in doing these sort of things rather than the other way around. Fine, it's quite an interesting discussion. Believe it or not, usually Leeds has the most to say at these meetings. The other local authorities don't necessarily are as vociferous as I am on behalf of things, because we've discussed road safety was the one we discussed the last time, because Councillor Gruen at the time was very interested in that. So, Councillor Khan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Chair, if it's possible, I know a few years ago we looked at the packed meetings and the tasking meetings, and as this board, it'll be nice to see the measure of success, how well we are doing, and what have we learned from those tasking meetings and packed meetings, and what's good working practice and what's not, so we can share with the other part of the ward as well.
Yeah, I think that's a very live issue at the present time. I wonder whether that might feed into the community safety and the neighbourhood policing update, which is already scheduled. But I think that whole tasking and community engagement piece could come with that, bearing in mind the neighbourhood policing teams from a West Yorkshire Police point of view do lead on that element.
It's not so much a question as just a suggestion. So I can see that hate crime is increasing and incidents of domestic violence are increasing. So I'd like to see that focused on, please.
Role of the person that's coming. Unfortunately, well, I keep calling her Councillor Lowe, the deputy West Yorkshire Mayor is coming, but we've also got.
She's head of police.
She's head of police. Paul, can you remember the lady's name?
Yeah, it's a lady called Julie Reid, who's recently been appointed as the police and crime lead, working very closely with Alison Lowe on the not just the policing agenda, but also I think the significance of that input concerns the new police and crime plan and the content of that.
Yeah, and in particular that the mayor has made it very clear that the safety of women is one of, if not the number one priority for her. It's number two if it's not number one, if you see what I mean. So yeah, that's already there. Councillor Garthwaite.
Yes, I was going to make that point as well, and not just domestic violence, but violence on the street, violence in licensed premises everywhere. And we're doing a significant amount of work in Leeds about that, which would be interesting to go into perhaps next time. And I also agree about involving the community safety champions more. I think that role can be a bit isolated, and sometimes you don't feel tied in to everything else that's going on. So I think that would be really, really valuable. And tours and trips around invaluable in finding out exactly what's going on and who's there on the ground.
Just to say on the role of community champions, not just the community safety champions, the whole role has been looked at and revalued. And I think you're exactly right. There needs to be more interaction with exec board members that are responsible, which was how we started off down this journey of community champions. But the role has been looked at and reevaluated, and we'll look to implement that and give it a bit more flesh on the bones.
I did invite to talk about the taxi side of things, but the other things I'd like him to, I've been sent some information from the Centre for Governance and Scrutiny about gambling harm. Now, should we carry out, he didn't know that this, because he's got this the other day. That's something that I don't know, would like your views on. And the other one I've been approached by is the new education officer from West Yorkshire Trading Standards about illicit tobacco. So from either the law and order side or the licensing side, have you any views on those three things, including the feedback on the taxis getting their domes put on?
Yeah, I'll start with that, if I may, Chair, with the idea behind having the sensors on the top of taxi and private hire vehicles. Certainly something that hasn't come to my attention, so I'm not aware of it before, but certainly something that we'd be happy to look at. I'm sure Councillor Gibson and the Licensing Committee would entertain and look at that provision. Certainly the Licensing Committee has on its work agenda for this year a complete review of all vehicle conditions, which would include all private hire and carriage vehicles. So we can certainly include it on that work. So that's something we could look at. I would also suggest that if that technology is available, it could also be used on existing council vehicles as well, rather than just limiting to taxi and private hire vehicles. So any vehicles that we have could also have the that fitted to it. And perhaps if it has got some sort of advertising facility on it, perhaps advertise some corporate messages on there for the public as well. So there's a dual strand to that. Moving on to the gambling work, again, crosses over with the Licensing Committee. I can't see any issues from Councillor Gibson's Licensing Committee working with yourselves and us providing more information about all the work we do to support organisations that help people with gambling problems and gambling addictions and things like that. We do a whole host of work, and perhaps we could bring an introductory paper through the Licensing Committee for their information, and then to yourselves in Scrutiny, giving an overview of all the work we do. And then perhaps after you've had a chance to look at that, then we can identify and see if you want to do any further work in any areas and how we can support yourselves to do that. And of course, I can liaise with Angela over the timing for that to get it through licensing and then to yourselves, so I can speak to Councillor Gibson about that, and I'm sure that will be fine. The final issue about the illicit sales of tobacco and what have you, we do an awful lot of work with trading standards, joint operations for illicit tobacco, illicit alcohol and all kinds of things that go on under the counter in some retail premises. And we'd be very happy to work with trading standards to bring a report to you, which overviews all the work we've done, what we found from that work, and welcome any comments or suggestions that you would have for any future work. So quite happy with all of those suggestions, really, Chair.
Just to note, the financial inclusion team have done and continue to do a lot of work with the gambling thing. If you look on page 122, I think it is of your packet, it highlights it there.
And to add to that, about 4 years ago, when I was chairing the Adult Social Care and Health Board, Scrutiny Board, we did an inquiry and worked very closely with the financial inclusion team on gambling harms, because it is a public health issue as well, and kind of oversaw the introduction of the clinic, the only one outside the Northern Gambling Harms Clinic, which is the only one outside London. So it might be something that you want to talk to the health scrutiny about. Sorry, Councillor.
Yeah, it does actually cross over into public health, and in May of this year, we actually had the harmful gambling guidance that was introduced, and we worked with the financial inclusion team on HI in relation to that. So it's out there, and happy to support where I can with my public health hat on.
Probably across scrutiny inquiry, because all that happened was I got sent the other day in the post the Centre for Governance and Scrutiny Gambling Commission and suggested questions, 10 questions that we should ask. So I thought, well, I'll bring it up and see if we can get going. Lee.
Yeah, I was just to echo what the exec members said. If John's proposing a paper, we can make sure that that paper covers all the work done around the gambling related harm, which has been extensive over a number of years. So.
Great. So. Right, let's go through it. So, page 99. Page 99. So if we now move on for the first actual official page is page 102, which is section 1 is on housing. Anybody get any questions on the housing section, which covers page 102, 103, 104, 105, 106, 107. Anybody get any questions on any of the housing related performance indicators that you've had a chance to look at? Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Void properties up 418%. Now we know that some of those are COVID pressures, and we know that some of those are material pressures. But what plans are in place to bring them down, reduce them? These houses are in void. They are desperately needed by our residents. So, you know, is the new strategy of carrying out the additional works impacting this to the great extent that it's clearly showing, or is it purely the COVID and material pressures that's causing this, please? Thank you.
Adam.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Councillor. I guess I'll start by just saying we are painfully aware of the need for these properties to come back into circulation within the city. It's something we monitor very closely on a weekly basis through our senior management team, and certainly within me and my team, my peers and colleagues, some of which are here today, quite rightly put us under the significant pressure to make sure they are back in circulation. You're quite right, Councillor, that there have been some pressures and remain pressures around the backlogs that were generated as a result of the pandemic, and then the subsequent material pressures. Equally, the labour pressures that are articulated in the report as well continue to be a challenge. What I would unfortunately add to that now is over the course of the last 6 months, the energy position within the country and our increased inability to switch energy providers during the void process has also added some time to the void turnaround time as well. I am pleased to say that obviously the report covers the period to the end of the financial year. I'm pleased to say that we are seeing some real positive trends over the last few months and net decreases in the overall number of void properties in the city during that period. That's predominantly down to our ability to introduce additional capacity into the void delivery sector. So we procured a short-term contract, 6-month contract with the option of a further 6 months to support our existing service providers of MEARS and LBS. That's now live and work is being delivered by those additional contractors, and that's really having a positive impact on the overall numbers. We are 3 months into that contract, and I think it's fair to say, although obviously we'll have to go through the appropriate governance, there will be a recommendation that we do exercise that additional 6 months available to us within that contract, so we can achieve our target position by the end of the calendar year, and that's our projected target at this point.
Thank you. Right. Okay. Yeah, if you want to follow up, and then Councillor Leigh, I think, has got to follow up as well. So yeah.
Thanks, Adam. That's really appreciated. The follow-up is how is the new contract with MEARS now settling down? I mean, I've asked this question time and again, and I know you've asked me to give them some time. So I think we're the thick end of a year in now. You know, have there been improvements? Because I'm personally not seeing it with my casework. Thank you.
The new mayor's contract went live on the 1st of October 2021. Yeah, so we're around just over 7-8 months. My mental arithmetic has failed me in this forum. I apologise, but there are a number of mobilisation activities that are outstanding as far as that contract's concerned. Forgive me, I think I may have given this update at the previous scrutiny board when you kind of raised a question at that point, Councillor Smith, around. Given the transition from the old contract into the new contract, there were a number of activities, mobilisation activities, improvement activities that we would have liked to have seen for the start of that contract. We did make the decision, and it was a tough decision, to suspend some of those activities in order to support the recovery programmes, specifically around repairs and voids. And we do have a detailed plan in place to ensure that those mobilisation activities are delivered and embedded and business as usual before we hit the 1-year anniversary of this new contract. So there are still some activities outstanding, but they will be delivered by the 1-year anniversary of the contract.
Okay, Councillor Lay, then Councillor Wadsworth.
Just a comment in support of the voids team, really. I had a conversation with our housing manager about voids, and what I think lots of members of the public and probably members don't realise is that having empty houses for the council is like having airplanes on runways or in terminals. They're not earning money whilst they're empty. They're losing shed loads of rented property. I don't think, I would hope there isn't anyone in the voids team who is happy with this, because it isn't just that it's stopping people getting into homes, but it's actually having an impact on the council's finances as well. So I just wanted to make that point, really, that there is a financial cost to an empty void as well.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. And just to be unequivocal, that there is no one within the service that is satisfied with the position. We absolutely recognise both the financial need and potentially even more so the social need for the properties, but yeah, acutely aware of both those pressures. And I assure you, listen, hard work's the minimum expectation, of course, but I assure you that no stone is being left unturned, and everyone is working beyond full capacity to ensure that this is recovered as soon as we possibly can.
Okay, Councillor Wadsworth.
I was firstly going to make the point around the social aspect of voids, that it would be 418 properties off Councillor Rafique's 7,000 list if we'd use them all, and by delaying means that we're not, and also we don't always bring properties to void as quickly as we should do. We've got empty properties. I know there's some empty in my ward which aren't actually voids as yet, so that needs to be considered. But my main question was that you've procured an extra resource for Leeds Building Services to deal with the voids. Is that a new resource, or is it at the expense of responsive repairs? Because a senior officer said to me the other day, it is in chaos. Councillor.
Okay, certainly just on that final point, Councillor, I'd be delighted to engage with outside this meeting to get some more detail on the final comment there, and certainly look into it. In relation to the new contract, it's a contract that's independent of Leeds Building Services and Mears. It's one that we have procured directly as Housing Leeds. We were really clear in the procurement process, and we engaged with a range of providers through the frameworks that we dealt with during that process to ensure that not only are we not I guess cross-fertilising services, so we're not using repairs resources to deal with voids and vice versa, but equally through Mears and through Leeds Building Services, they obviously engage a range of subcontractors as well in order to deliver their responsibilities. What we didn't want to do is end up with another provider coming in and competing for that same finite resource within the city. So we were really clear on effectively casting the net a little bit more widely than the Leeds city borders, in order to ensure that additional capacity that came in was exactly that. It wasn't people who were working in any shape or form with the council at the moment, be that housing or other areas of the council, because I think the vast majority of these trades are under an awful lot of pressure at the moment. So it was additional capacity, not just to the service, but to the city.
Okay, right. Can I now move on now to pages 115 to 122, which is community hubs and welfare. Anybody get any comments they would like to ask any of the officers and or the executive member on the performance here? I see nobody volunteering, so sorry, so you've got a comment, yeah?
Got a comment, Chair. Sorry, I've had cause to speak with some members of the team from the Healthy Holiday Scheme, and I found them excellent, and they've really gone above and beyond. So I'd like to put on record my thanks. That's brilliant. Thank you.
Lee?
That's, I mean, thank you for that, Councillor. I mean, Healthy Holidays is a brilliant scheme, and again, it's a cross council. Well, it's cross city one actually. In terms of the community foundations, third sector, schools, the hubs, plus all the services that contribute, events, parks, do lots around Healthy Holidays in terms of what the kids can go and do. So it's a brilliant scheme, and Leeds one of the first to do it, obviously quite a few years ago now, but it's a really good scheme.
Thank you. Okay, right, Councillor Garthwaite.
Just wondering whether all the staff who are meeting with clients face to face have full disability awareness, because I've had a bit of comments about, particularly from people who are deaf, that they have a lot of difficulty. And I know myself, being rather hard of hearing, that if somebody speaks slowly and looks at you and opens their mouth quite a lot while they're speaking, it's really, really helpful. And it seems that this isn't always happening. People are looking around the room and mumbling in their perception. So I wondered whether full awareness training is being given to all staff who might be meeting with people on a face-to-face basis.
I'll certainly take that away. We do provide training when that training was last done because of COVID and things like that. I know during COVID we put in quite a lot of help for the deaf community specifically, because obviously the nature of, we didn't do face-to-face, so we had to think very differently about how we did it. But I will take that away now. I'll make sure that we pick it up.
Okay. And if by on cue, Councillor Cooper comes in just as we're about to start talking about the performance indicators under Safer Stronger. So would you like to introduce yourself, Councillor Cooper?
Hey, good morning, everybody, and apologies for not being able to attend until this point, but I've been on a national call regarding with national employers about this year's pay award. So that's why I wasn't here earlier. So I'm glad to be here today.
Thank you.
Good to see you all. Look forward to your comments and questions.
Right. So there's nothing more on that. So we'll move now on to page 123. And also at the top of page 127 on safer, stronger communities. Anybody, any questions or comments on the performance and information here? Okay, right, okay. There's no date, right. If we could now move on to page 127, environmental services. Anybody got any questions on that? That goes up to page 129. Anybody get any questions on the environmental services? If not, we then go on to elections and regulatory in terms of parking functions and parking administration, including parking permits. Anybody got any questions on those things? Yes.
Sorry, I wasn't fast enough off the
go back.
Back on bins. So I suppose my question was a bit, and if this isn't the right forum for it, then I can talk to somebody separately. I suppose my query is why the discrepancy, particularly in provision for recycling in across different parts of the city. So in the ward where I live, or certainly the area where I live in the ward, we just get monthly green bins. Lots of people would like to see more of that. I appreciate there are people in my community who don't value the importance of recycling, but I suppose there's just a real discrepancy between different communities getting quite different provision on recycling. And I'd be keen to hear the rationale.
John will be doing about that, because he is doing quite a bit about that. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Carlisle. I know you've dropped an email and recently having to raise the same sort of question. So perhaps if we have a chat between ourselves and meet up for a discussion and give you some briefing, but hopefully some of this will also be picked up in the new board members visits Newmarket House and Rurth and perhaps the Murth. Yeah, very quickly. The council introduced green bins a number of years ago, and as part of that process looked at introducing an alternate week collection across the city, and at that time made decisions around which parts of the city, in consultation with members at the time, made decisions about which parts of the city were in a better position to be able to take the alternate week collection, in other words, a green bin one week, a black bin the next, and which parts of the city it was more of a challenge. For various reasons, and those parts of the city generally stayed at a weekly black collection and a monthly, which is a 4-weekly green collection. So what we're doing, and we've covered this in the scrutiny work last year particularly, we're looking at through the route review at revisiting those areas that don't have alternate week collection. So as part of the discussions we'll have at ward member level soon, and some of those have started to begin. That's one of the issues that we're covering with ward members. We'll meet with you with the maps in your area of where currently aren't covered by alternate week collection, and have that exact discussion with you and go through the pros and cons and hopefully reach an agreement, a supportive agreement with yourselves of which areas we can bring into alternate week collection. As I say, that conversation will include the difficulties that brings, and it will need support and education in those areas to ensure that if we do bring alternate week collection in areas that have previously been difficult, we avoid as much as we can contamination of those bins, so it doesn't become a negative experience. But yeah, so we are working with that as part of the review, and as I say, we'll be meeting with ward members over the coming weeks to discuss exactly that issue.
So, John, can you just reiterate the timescales that you've got? Because the last time I spoke to you, Councillor Rafik was just about to sign off a letter that was going to be going out to members. What's the sort of timescales can we expect on that now?
Yeah, we've taken opportunity where we've met with a number of members over other issues to have that discussion with them. So we're about to send out that email to all members to invite them to that meeting, and we hope to arrange that over the next coming 5 or 6 weeks. That sort of time scale to meet with members over that sort of period and have those conversations about their issues.
Okay, so I've got Councillor Lay, then Councillor Wadsworth.
Thanks, Chair. John, first of all, thanks for saving the recycling centre in Otley in Eden. Our residents were very pleased when the proposals to close that was changed. Can I just ask, it's probably been 8 years since I've had a look at sort of the recycling figures, and if I remember correctly, was it 57% or something? What are some of the issues of why our recycling figures seem so stubbornly stuck just below half? And secondly, how do we compare to comparable authorities?
Through the chair, thanks, Councillor Lay. I think we've covered a lot of this through the scrutiny inquiry work and provided information around this, and I'm quite happy to revisit that and have a one-to-one discussion, Councillor Lay, around some of those issues to work through the figures with you. But broadly speaking, what we've discussed before at this board is that Leeds is around, it's not as good as what you're saying, actually. Leeds is around just under the 40% mark. We're struggling to break through that barrier, which is comparable to other core cities across the country. We're probably in the middle to perhaps pushing up a part of the table of the core cities. And that's part of the issue in terms of what we're looking at, or the fundamental issue, what we're looking in terms of the waste strategy, is how we break through that. And again, without repeating a lot of the discussion we've had here, much of that is dependent on the government's own national resource and waste strategy and what their requirements will be and the funding opportunities that will bring to expand what we're anticipating the requirements to be around, particularly glass and food collection. They're the sort of issues that, if we brought to the table, would really add to the percentage increase in recycling. Everything else is really tinkering at the edges. But just to make the final point, and it was made earlier, was that the relationship with the carbon impact of what we do is critical, and that's part of the dilemma we have at the moment. And one of the reasons I really would welcome coming back to scrutiny with that information that Councillor Rafiq said that, and as chair, you've said that you're keen to see. So that information around what different materials, the impact of different materials, collecting different materials and recycling different materials, or preventing those materials being wasted in the first place, what the carbon impact is of those materials is critical. And there is that dilemma, and we had a meeting with DEFRA earlier this week, actually, where we were discussing this issue, which is quite interesting. And I was putting forward that really that it's quite an old-fashioned way to be performance managing recycling, to just look at the percentage tonnage of what's recycled, when really we should be looking at the carbon impact of what we're doing. So that's really what we're trying to do at the moment. The work we've commissioned is quite at the forefront of things nationally, and that, again, we've offered to share that with DEFRA. And that's what I'll be bringing forward through this group, certainly, to explain that better, and for you to look at, like I say, the various carbon impacts of recycling various materials or preventing that material getting in the waste stream in the first place. Some of it is, a lot of it, to be honest, is the same sort of materials. You know, so if we recycled more metals, for example, or that would have a good impact in terms of carbon reduction, and it would also impact the percentage of recycling as it's currently measured in tonnage terms. But we want to be more nuanced in how our strategy evolves, and therefore what we introduce in Leeds. So kind of a long-winded answer, but it's complex. And like I said, we've discussed some of these issues before, scrutiny.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Wadsworth, then Councillor Walshaw.
I don't need a long-winded answer, Chair. I just need a figure from this. It was really around 44, the bin collection rate. It's really to Councillor Rafiq. It is a negative change. We are emptying less bins than we were on time. I know it's a small amount, but how many actual bins is it? And how many bins is it that are not emptied on the day of their collection?
And I think it's a more technical question, which I'm sure John will be able to give you. But as explained, and I think in various forms, Councillor Wadsworth, in the past, you know, last year, you can't compare last year with this year or 2 years back. We had some clearly, you know, middle of last year, particularly September, or July, August time, some COVID-related pressures. So that the figures you got there is for 21, 22. We're into 22, 23 now. John, do you want to just go into the technical info there?
I'm just trying to work out my calculator then what it is, and we can't. So I'll have to come back with the exact figure. But just to give you an idea of scale, we empty about 500,000 bins a week at the moment in Leeds, with the garden waste service currently running. So if you apply that percentage miss to that £500,000 a week, you'll get an idea of how many misses that will be a week that we've got recorded. But I'm quite happy to provide a breakdown of the figure in the performance report and give some context to that to help members.
Fine, thank you. Councillor Walshaw.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, just a short one from me, John. What's the current status of the service review for complex inner areas like Headingley, Hyde Park, Burley?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. Yeah, we're on with that. At last, we restarted it following the COVID-related issues. We're looking to complete the whole review before the end of summer. So that's the aim. We did say we would prioritise the first phases of restarting the review around those more complex areas for logistical reasons, if nothing else. It helps us. Once we know what we need in those more complex, hard to access areas of the city, the rest of the city, then we know what we've got to deal with, which is a better way of doing the jigsaw, really. So we're starting work on that, and we expect to consult with more members in those areas affected pretty soon, and take some soundings from yourselves around local, other local stakeholders that we should perhaps be speaking to. But the whole review itself, we're aiming to finish by the end of summer.
As the issue was raised about bin collections, my problem isn't necessarily the bin collections, which fine, we've got a problem. It's more the recoveries. There appears to have been a problem with getting the recoveries done. Misses, fine. I mean, in the last week, we've had a number of vehicle breakdowns, and Councillor Rafik and I discussed it the other day, and there was no problem in the explanation that I was given by Councillor Rafik. But what about recoveries? We don't appear to be collecting the bins within 48 hours in a number of locations. Is there a particular problem, or is it just one of those things just now?
Both of those really, Chair. It is one of those things, but it is a problem at the moment sometimes. And we're doing some extra recruitment at the moment. This time of the year, as we go into summer, we do rely a little more on overtime, but also on agency staff just to make up, so we can get extra support crews out, and there's budgeting for that. But we have struggled in the last couple of weeks to get not just the crews out, but then 2 or 3 backup vehicles on top of that. Some days we can get 2 or 3, 4 out, which is fine. Then some days we get none out, and then obviously that we struggle to recover, and it snowballs. So there is an issue at the moment in terms of us getting those extra crews out. And so we're doing some recruitment at the moment to get actually contracted staff in rather than having to rely on agency staff. I think in previous years, it's been relatively easy to go to the agency if we quickly need 4 or 5 people. But that's with the current employment market everywhere becoming increasingly difficult just to pluck people out of the air that have got those skills, particularly drivers.
That's fine. Yeah. That's fine. Okay, if we can now move on to the on page 129, the parking functions, parking administration, managing the council's off street. Anybody get any questions about that? Councillor Lay.
Any plans to make the car parks in Otley free? They are the only 3 chargeable car parks according to this in section 53. That doesn't feel very fair and equitable.
Do you want to
Yeah, I don't think that's for me to answer. I mean, I think in line with all our car parks income, we review it through our budget procedures, and again something we'll review and look at, Chair. But I mean, it goes without saying that we've, as you can see from the report, we've seen a huge drop in car parking income during COVID, and even now as well as we get up to kind of recover from COVID. Yeah.
Okay. Right. Anything on that section? If not, we'll now move on to section 6, parks and countryside. Anybody any questions on those? No. Okay. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. So the Woodland Creation para 55. I think we need to keep looking at this, and also the management of the existing tree canopy that we have. This morning, again, I've had another complaint about right to light. So the whole policy does need looking at, which I know we are trying to get done. I've also had lots of complaints about the central reservation of the ring roads, etc., which I know we're doing the relaxed mowing. I know we are trying to do our bit for the climate emergency, and I accept and understand all of that. However, I think it looks very scruffy and sends out the wrong message to any visitors to our fantastic city. Thank you.
Right. I don't know whether Councillor Reif wants to take that, or whether Sean wants to take that one. Yeah, Councillor Reif. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess scruffy is subjective, really, isn't it? I think it looks really good and really wonderful, and I've had those sort of comments back to me. If there's any particular areas which there's a particular sort of worry or concern, then more than happy to pick that up. Trish, you and I are meeting anyway, aren't we? We're catching up next week, so we can. Yeah, we can have a catch up in terms of the tree planting and on the back of that, could I make a suggestion, if I may, Chair? Seeing as everybody's inviting everybody, I think it'd be really good. Are
you offering a party or something? That'd be good.
No, I can promise you there's no party. That's not something we do here. What'd be really good is to actually see the seed collection at the area, to see where they come in from schools and what the process is, and actually see the area, because I think that'll just give us such an appreciation of the work that happens.
Yeah, I think we should do that as well. Yeah,
for the board to do.
Councillor Hayden.
Are you going to need this room in future? Yeah, it is wonderful to go to the area. I myself and Councillor Rafiq got the opportunity last year when the triathlon were planting a seed for every a tree, sorry, for every athlete, and I took a picture of our trees from Temple Newsome, which were doing much better than the Meanwood ones. Can I say? And it is a fantastic. Just on the obviously Parks and Countryside manager contract for the verges. Having said that, they come under my portfolio in terms of they are beside the roads or in the middle of roads. So we have done quite a lot of communication, and I have had the pleasure of walking down a central reservation in my ward, actually, with Councillor Arif to have a photo opportunity with one of the signs. I have to say that Scruffy is objective. Once the germination starts of wildflowers, and it can take, because it's been closely cropped for decades, it will take 2 or 3 years for the germination of the daisies and the buttercups and all those wildflowers but the habitat, the total acreage of habitat for all kinds of small mammals and insects and that sort of thing, which then attracts birds and you know, in terms of the eco crisis and the biodiversity crisis, it is you know, kind of just so important that we use, you know, central reservations, etc., that aren't used for anything else. Also, I have to say, when I visit other cities, I quoted out in Whitby last year, they've got signs saying, "Excuse the weeds, we're feeding the bees." And we've done something similar in our signs that Councillor Carlisle actually led on last year. So this isn't Leeds looking scruffy. Everywhere's looking scruffy now, and bring it on.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Right, I've got Councillor Lay and then Councillor Brooke, then Councillor Wadsworth.
Thank you. Can I ask about the Woodland creation scheme, which we're planting 25 million, I think, we're planting over 25 years, however many thousands. Are we counting what we plant, but are we also counting what actually survive? Because there's been some examples in my community where lots of the whips, I think they call them, the whips have been lost, some to vandalism up at the Tarn, for example, but others to other reasons, I suspect. Are we counting, do we have an idea of how many we expect of all of these trees? Because it's easy to say we've planted 15 million, but how many actually will be worthwhile, or whatever the word, how many will survive?
Again, Sean, are you going to answer that one?
So
you've always got these figures at your fingertips.
Yes, I mean we plant 4,500 trees per hectare in terms of the whips, but actually to create a hectare of tree canopy, you probably need about 300 to get to maturity. So that is what we expect, and the reason why we plant them in densities is because it is. What happens is you get that natural competition, which actually creates the tree canopy quicker because they all grow up and competing with each other. So that's why we do that. That's Forestry Commission standards. Those are the national recommendations, and that's what we follow. in terms of individual sites where we get, where you get some vandalism, we do a beat up program. So we'll follow that up and do some replanting. And then I'm pleased to say this last winter, all of the replanting that we did as a result of vandalism was actually undertaken by volunteers. We got a fantastic take up. So there's a real groundswell of support from the public, and the public want to get in there and do some replants. So anywhere that needs replanting, again, we'll be picking it up this winter and hopefully engaging thousands of volunteers to help us do that as well.
And a number of areas, certainly in my ward, that have benefited because you've done the wilding at the same time. That, I think, has helped, that you've got the whips being planted and the wilding. And so they're not standing out and giving people an incentive, if I can put it as undiplomatically as that, to remove them. But so they don't really want to wander through knee-high grass, and it's making a big difference. Certainly in my ward, I can say that it's happening. So, yeah, Councillor Brooke and then Councillor Wadsworth.
Thanks, Chair. I'm not going to go on for too long. I'm just wondering if natural burial's been considered along with woodland creation, so that, because currently there's no option for natural burial in Leeds, as far as I'm aware. I think the nearest place is Sheffield, but I could be wrong. I think there's a proper business case for eco burial and sort of green burial. So I was just wondering if anyone's looked into that.
Anybody want to take it?
Yes, Chair. I mean, we do currently review that. The space that you need to be able to do that is still, you need to comply with all the environmental requirements in terms of leachates from bodies and things. So that does form a challenge to us because cemetery space is at quite a premium. But we do constantly review that, and I think members have said that it's something you want to look at as part of the scrutiny review. So we're more than happy to look at that and see where we can possibly do that. We do have an area at Lawnswood Cemetery where we do undertake natural burial, but that's quite a limited area.
Yeah, Councillor Leigh, yeah.
Explain, no daft question apparently. What's a natural burial?
So traditional burials, you tend to have all formaldehyde and stuff in you to preserve the body. But obviously what happens is it leaches into the soil and then that gets into the ecosystem. So it's not very nice.
Oh, I thought sorry, I misunderstood that then. I thought, I thought you meant people being able to be buried in fields and on the Shedden, for example, because we've had requests for ashes to be scattered on the Shedden and been refused, and that's got to be a fine. That could be an income stream, I think. It's just the way that we place the person in the ground rather than outside of cemeteries. That's why.
Can you go?
Sorry, Chair. You can also, because there's no formaldehyde, it means that you can plant trees and make it quite a nice green space rather than it being just completely sort of a bit of grass. You know, you can't have trees growing near to that much formaldehyde in the floor.
Some residents in my area have also suggested getting buried in wicker type baskets that biodegrade, to be quite frank, and the body biodegrades at a similar rate. That's wonderful. But that's what, certainly in my area, I've had a number of people who've approached me about a field that wasn't site allocations of all things. But because of the reasons that Sean pointed out, that some sites just aren't suitable because of underground streams, flooding and various other things, because not that we've all necessarily watched some films, but sometimes if water rises, other things rise as well, and that can cause a big problem. And so we've got to be careful about what happens. So, Councillor Wadsworth. Yeah, I know.
Moving swiftly on, Chair, or swiftly backwards, actually, to, I mean, as you say, Councillor, the mowing of the centre reservation is subjective. Some people like it, some people don't. But what is the cost of the signs? There's a lot of signs going up. They're very big signs, both in financial terms and in energy, because they're all steel signs. And the second part of my question is probably to John, is regarding the hard surface weed control, I do accept that we have to let the weeds grow taller to spray them to get an effect, but it's a case of removing the weeds when they're dead, because we not very good at that. And our street scene department don't seem to think that that's part of their remit.
So do you want to answer the first part, and then we'll leave John to answer the role of street cleaning?
Apologies, Chair. I don't have the exact cost of the signage in front of me.
If you can get it for us.
But what we do is that obviously we've invested in the signage because that's informational. It's for the public to so they can realise what we're doing. But then we actually recover those costs back through sponsorship. So most of the sites already that we've identified and started to put the signage in are actually now getting covered by sponsorship. So we will recoup more than 100% of the cost of the signage over the life of the programme.
Okay, now John, the role of street cleansing.
Yeah, I'm happy to look at any localised issues that I'm not aware of, but the clean neighbourhoods teams have as part of their remit to sweep, both using the smaller path sweepers and the larger road sweeper vehicles through a combination of programme sweeping works on agreed maps, where detritus and the main roads and issues around gullies and that are the most common, and then respond to ad hoc requests as they come in. So as far as I'm aware, there's not a we won't sweep and help clear weeds whether they're alive or not. But if there's a particular issue that I need to look into, I'm certainly willing to do that.
Do you want to follow up? Yeah.
Up on both, probably. The signs look like income generation rather than saving the bees. And secondly, it's the brushes aren't moving it, John, though, are they? Because they're so big before they're killed that the docks and things, the brushes don't move them. You need a shovel or a hoe to shift them off, and that's not always done.
That is point noted. Yeah. Councillor Akhtar?
I mean, it's on a separate sort of note, Chair, but when you mentioned about the gullies and when you mentioned about the sweepers, one thing came to mind was that why can't both the sweepers and the gullies, because the gullies over the last, since we had the flood, I mean, gullies in our city has improved really well across the city. What I was thinking, why can't both the sweepers and the gullies department can be under one umbrella rather than the locality team, because I think they can work really closely. I mean, one thing we should be proud of is that our city is the cleaner and the greener city compared with other coast cities that we visit on a regular basis. But I think these two services can work together better than having separate sort of ways of working. One, I mean, sweepers are with the locality team at the moment. Gullies are with the highways. Am I right? So why can't we have both of them in either highways? Because what the result that we have seen is a lot better over the last few months.
That's my own personal experience. Yeah.
Councillor Rafiq to get in a ring to argue who's going to take on the responsibility.
Just very briefly through the chair, thanks, Councillor Akhtar. The history of the gullies and the street cleaning operations was that they were together in the localities team, the original Clean Neighbourhoods model. But I think probably 2 or 3, maybe 4 years ago, that they were split and gullies went back to highways. At the time, I believe it's before my time as chief officer, but at the time I believe it was it made more sense operationally for highways to be managing those vehicles and that fleet and that particular operation. But regardless, we do still coordinate and work very closely together. So the person that manages the gully fleet works very closely with us. But it's particularly in those areas that are identified as the high flood risk areas that require more frequent gully clearing and more frequent sweeping. I think ultimately we're both working on limited resource, so the sort of ideal model of one following the other around, it just isn't practical from a resource perspective. But we do work very closely together, and I do believe it has improved over the last year or two as a coordinated service.
Okay, thank you. Right, for the last 5 minutes, I'm going to hand over to Tim Rowlett, who is going to explain what's going to be happening with performance management and the role of scrutiny potentially in this.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. So this is just a quick recap about performance reporting over the next few months. As you're all aware, we replaced the Best Council Plan with the Best City Ambition earlier this year, structured around those 3 pillars of inclusive growth, zero carbon, health and well-being. And obviously, whenever you change a council strategy or sort of revise it, it's always good practice to look again at things like risks and performance indicators to make sure that they're properly aligned, you're reporting the right things to the right people in the right depth. So myself and the team, in conjunction with services, will be looking at what are the really important relevant performance information and indicators that we need to report against the Best City Ambition, what needs to go where and in what amount of detail. So for example, we talked a few moments ago about comparing some of the core city information for recycling rates. So that's something that we'll obviously pick up. So as part of that work, we'll be going around all the various directorate management teams to agree what we're going to report. But also, Councillor Anderson, we intend to meet with yourself and the other scrutiny chairs to get you on board with the performance that we want to bring to these committees in future, and to get your thoughts and ideas on that, as well as looking at what we intend to do. All that's currently work in progress at the moment, so rest assured you'll be getting an invite from me in the near future around that. I'm happy to take any questions if anybody's got any comments on future performance reporting.
Anybody get any comments? No. Right, in that case, I am going to give the final comment today, because she's not had a chance to speak. Councillor Cooper, does your other colleagues have had a chance to address this and say, I know you've only got a couple of minutes, I apologise for that, but
That's okay. It seems like I missed a really good scrutiny board meeting by the sounds of all the invites that have been floating about. I hope I didn't miss any of those. I've now my portfolio stretches over 3 scrutiny boards, where it used to be just with this scrutiny board. So I do have to visit 3 different boards to work with over the year. But my style of being an exec board member, as the chair knows, and probably many returning members know, that I'm really kind of open to suggestion and working with scrutiny board members proactively, which I always prefer instead of having to react to things. So if there's anything that you want to raise at scrutiny, or if you haven't got the resource or the time to do it at scrutiny, I'm more than happy for members to contact me directly, which many of you do, which is absolutely fine. But I really do look forward to working with scrutiny throughout the year, and look forward to the added value that you bring to the work that we do as an administration. So thank you very much, and apologies for missing the earlier part of your meeting.
So thank you all very much for your attendance today. Hopefully for those of you who have been to a scrutiny meeting for the first time, I've found it interesting. When we get down into the nuts and bolts of things, it can get very, very interesting in terms of looking at things and people bringing innovative ideas in order to do things. So the final thing is, item 11 is the work schedule. We will update the work schedule, and that's probably it. Thank you very much. For the sake of the new members, what I try and do, if at all possible, is have the meeting lasting no more than 2 hours, so that if you can plan your time for meetings ahead, because some people often say to me, can I go early? Which is fine, that's not a problem. It's just, if you're organising things, roughly 2 hours the meeting, plus the half hour for the pre-meeting. 2.5 altogether, but the actual meeting itself.